Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Nate. I also go by Hockey Boy Nate. And today we are still discussing the severe weather threat that's going to occur on Tuesday, Wednesday, and possibly Thursday. So if you guys are new to my channel, please be sure to subscribe, as well as like the video and turn on notifications, as well as share this with friends and family and on social media. Also follow me on social medias. I will have timestamps for specific days if you want to go there specifically. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I won't be talking about today a whole lot because I talked about that yesterday and how temperatures will basically be the same as it was yesterday. But let's get into it. And I know it's going to be a little bit more discombobulated of a video, but we've actually got someone who's going to be installing my my anemometer at the top of my house. So it's going to be pretty cool to have my weather station finally up and running, but we'll just get to as much as we can here. There's a slight risk that has been issued for southern portions of Kansas into central parts of Oklahoma, as well as west central to north central parts of Texas. So this includes places like Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Wichita, Lubbock, Abilene, further off towards like Woodward, maybe further south towards like Midland. If you guys live in these areas, you really have to watch out for this because the potential for severe weather is here. Your hail risk does have a 15% chance indicated in yellow, and your brown is a 5% chance. So whatever probability you have that chance of getting 1-inch size hail or larger within 25 miles of a point. You also have the hatched area, which is indicated right within this black circle with dotted lines, and that is a indication of the potential for some large hail, some very damaging hail, a 10% chance or greater of seeing hail over 2 inches within 25 miles of a point. So Lubbock, Midland, Odessa, Big Spring, Plainview, if you live over in those areas, you really need to watch out for this. Even as far north as Woodward in Oklahoma, you really need to watch out. So this is on Tuesday here. This is the severe weather threat that could bring some very large hail. Then you also have your wind risk. You have a 5% chance for wind. That's also in Nebraska and northern Kansas. You also have your 15%, which extends basically over where the hail risk was. So whatever probability you have of that, it's that chance of getting 58 mile per hour wind gusts or above within 25 miles of a point. No significant risk here, which is the good news, but definitely still something to keep in mind because, gusty winds that high up can topple trees and power lines and can do damage to roofs and sidings of houses. Then we also have our tornado risk, and because there is already a 5% chance for tornadoes, we're going to try to live stream. If it continues to keep its 5% chance for tornadoes, then we will live stream. So something to keep in mind for that. There also is the chance for some tornadoes over here near Cheyenne, McCook, and Colby in northern Kansas, northeastern parts of Colorado, and southern parts of Nebraska because the HRRR is showing some cells that can form off near the low pressure system. So we'll have to monitor for that. But the highest risk for tornadoes will be right near Abilene, Altus, Oklahoma, Sweetwater, Texas, Snyder, Texas, Vernon, Texas, those general vicinities. Even I believe Elk City may be in the risk as well in Oklahoma. So we'll watch out for those storms as well. Let's take a look at the models here. As I said, we're going to be a bit discombobulated. So if we're not exactly all too, in the best time frame here, the best well-managed time frame, it's my fault. I'm trying to rush this so that I can get to the handyman to get to my roof. So, storms here for Tuesday. Here's Tuesday morning, and if you want to follow along, the time is right here in Eastern Daylight Time, so just subtract 1 hour and you'll be good. But this is Tuesday morning officially. And now, since it's starting to get towards the Tuesday afternoon hours, you can see a lot of scattered storms, a lot of cloud cover here, which means that you won't have that classic daytime heating to where the sun actually heats the ground and makes it warmer and makes it relatively moist. So your energy for convective available potential energy, the displacement between warm air rising, the warm air at the surface, and the cold air in the atmosphere. That's why we call it daytime heating. The displacement between that is not as significant because of this cloud cover. So just something that I'm seeing here based off of the models. But then towards the afternoon hours, we do have some storms that form off near Abilene. And this is something that we're going to have to watch very closely because the parameters over there are ripe for some tornadic conditions. And you even have some storms that form off over here towards Odessa. So that's something we're going to have to continue to monitor as time progresses. And then you can also see these storms up here in Colorado, Kansas, and Nebraska. They also start to fire off at around the same time. So 9 o'clock is when these thunderstorms should be in full bloom. And then that's when it'll continue to move on through off towards Oklahoma. The thing about it is that there's also more cells that could form even in behind these storms around the midnight hours on Tuesday into Wednesday. And as that continues to move on through, you can see some more scattered thunderstorms from there. Dew points is going to be relatively moist for the most part. You can see how most of it is actually up in the 60s. There is some areas out in front of it that are in the 70s, but I don't foresee any sort of prefrontal convection to develop here. But if there is any sort of that opportunity to where storms could form out in front of the dry line, which I'll talk about that in a second, then there could definitely be some storms that could be really gusty, also could be tornadic. We also have a classic dry line setup here, and I think there's a lot of confusion as to what a dry line setup means. So just because there's a dry line setup doesn't mean that storms always will form. So if there's a dry line here, it typically means that if there were storms to form along that line, that they could produce some very large hail. Very, very large hail. Like, it's night and day, the difference between storms with a dry line and storms without a dry line. So, it's more or less to where if thunderstorms can be able to develop, can they break that capping? I did a good demonstration yesterday as to how capping inversion works, or how the limiting factor in the atmosphere works. But if warm air cannot rise, then thunderstorms cannot rise, and thunderstorms cannot develop and sustain. So just because you have a dry line setup here doesn't mean that storms will always form. You have to make sure that other parameters are good enough for storms to be able to develop. So something to keep in mind with that. But we do have a classic dry line setup here in western Texas, and this is something that we need to monitor, especially with the overnight hours. But you can see earlier on in the day, it's really moist. This is in the this is more towards the noon hours, more morning hours for the people out in the plains, because as I said, hour behind. You still have it relatively moist, so if storms could form right within this area, maybe the initial ones could be very tornadic, but it's still something we're going to have to take a look at in the models here rather soon. Your CAPE, we're going to take a look at your surface-based CAPE. Anything from yellow and above is around 2,000 joules per kilogram, which is enough that you would need for strong storms to be severe. You also have your greens, which is below that, towards like the 1,000 levels, and then the blues that are below 1,000. So we have some decent amounts of CAPE for the most part, especially here in Oklahoma. You can see how there's some CAPE amounts that actually get into the oranges, which, if I'm not mistaken, that's towards the 2,500 joules per kilogram range as well. There's also some CAPE up here in Iowa and Missouri, but as I said, if the atmosphere isn't favorable for warm air to rise, then you can't have your thunderstorms to be able to develop. So just something to monitor there. Just also to note is the atmosphere for the 2% range also has some decent amounts of CAPE as well. So if there were thunderstorms to develop, there is the chance for that as well, heading on through into the evening. There's also another thing that I want to note real quickly that the Storm Prediction Center does not say. You notice how far west the risk goes, but it's the marginal doesn't touch New Mexico in this area. And there's an area that I'm watching somewhere down near Fort Stockton that if it comes into fruition, you could have some storms that could form down here. Maybe be some pretty interesting supercells, and then be able to move on through. They won't last all too long, but they still could produce some very large hail and maybe even some damaging winds. The chance for tornadoes cannot be ruled out, but once again, it's back to that limiting factor. If the atmosphere is not favorable for it, then it won't be able to develop. But most of the models have been picking up on some storms to form around there, so I really think we should monitor that as much as possible. Let's take a look at the low-level jet here for us. So here's Tuesday afternoon into the evening. And you can see, I gotta check my notification because if it was him, then I'm scared. No, it's not. Okay, thank God. You can see the low-level jet is kind of decent for the most part. This basically helps your low-level wind shear. Helps your storms form structure, your supercells form structure. And so if we ever get veering with height, that's how you actually get supercellular storms that could be tornadic. But you can see your low-level jets coming from the southwest for the most part. You also have that up here in Oklahoma and in Kansas. So that's not bad. You have some areas that could be particularly strong. If we actually increase it over time, you can see it actually does get stronger overnight, which is typically what happens as things get into the overnight hours. But yeah, that's jet is originally coming out of the southwest. Then as you get into the real overnight hours, it starts to come out from the south. So the potential for something tornadic could still exist in some of these areas, especially later on overnight. If there's enough energy for it to support thunderstorms, then your threat for tornadoes is possible. So definitely something that we're going to have to watch out for further on through. Your low-level jet also sits here for quite some time into Wednesday. We'll talk about that there in a second. But let's get into some soundings here real quickly. I'm using the NAM 3 kilometer because the HRRR cannot accurately depict dry line setups. So I cannot use that all too effectively in my forecasts. So just something to keep in mind as to me showing my work. So there is something here in northern Oklahoma, according to the NAM 3 kilometer, the significant tornado parameter. There is a little bit of capping inversion, but the veering with height is not all too bad. It could be a lot better. So there's some tornadic indications here. You have decent energy. Your convective available potential energy is not bad. If I can actually zoom this in here for you all, you might be able to see a whole lot better. So I said CAPE needs to be above 2,000 to be strong. There it is. Your lapse rates are not bad for hail. If they're typically 6.5 and above, then, or around 6.5 and above, they're going to be able to sustain some sort of hail. Your helicity and your shear is all right. It's not too great in the inflow, but if it's surface to 1 kilometer shear, then it's not bad. But it's very hard for me to say that this is going to be mainly tornadic up here in northern Oklahoma. So let's take it right here in the 5% chance for tornadoes. And you can see very much more well-defined hodograph. The more it kind of curls, the cleaner it curls in the hodograph, which this is looking up at 0 to 3 kilometers. The cleaner it curls, the higher the chance of tornadic systems to form, the higher the wind shear is, or not the higher the wind shear, the higher the veering is, which can indicate some tornadic cells to form. So the environment is right there. And by the way, for any of you who don't know what the hodograph is, it's basically, if you can imagine a weather balloon and how it gets launched from a specific site, imagine you having a radar and tracking that weather balloon. So the weather balloon starts going further and further north from you, and then it goes east at a specific spot. It still stays relatively north away from you, but it goes east, and then it goes northeast and kind of just goes and zooms off to Never Ever Land. So that's kind of what the hodograph tells you. That's what it tells us, and it's a good indicator as to what could be happening with the atmosphere. So just by me looking at this, this tells me a good picture. It also tells me that your supercells are going to be relatively interesting because the hook's going to be more on the rear of the storm, and your forward flank downdraft's going to be in the way of it. So your supercells are going to look a bit more like this. Excuse me. That was a terrible drawing. Your supercells are going to look a bit more like that if it were to form something tornadic. And we'll see that in our live stream, hopefully tomorrow. Hope if it doesn't impact people, as long as it doesn't. But if there is anything tornadic, I'm expecting supercells to kind of look like that, and we'll see it as it continues to progress on forward tomorrow. All right. So not a bad environment here. With these storms. And just for anyone who's curious, you guys can pause the video because I'm not going to talk about this long, but this is the type of environment that I was talking about near Fort Stockton. And so I don't think I need to explain myself a lot more about the environment down there because it's really hard to get thunderstorms to develop with the amount of capping in the mixing layer. But, you know, still something to keep in mind as things continue to move on forward. All right, day 3 outlook, I should say. This is Wednesday. They issued a massive marginal, and they didn't go higher because they don't know what's happening on Tuesday still. Like, they seriously still have no clue as to what's happening, and, you know, I don't blame them with how complex the situation has been over the past week and how predictability in regards to where the low pressure and how the wind shear will all fall into line has been called into question constantly. So that's been more or less something to where it's like a domino effect, and they don't know how that could impact people along the way. So they just kind of added a massive marginal risk just to kind of cover as many areas as they can where they think the potential for severe weather could be. But still the chance for some severe weather here across places like Dallas, Fort Worth, Oklahoma City, I should say, Springfield, St. Louis, all the way up into Indianapolis, all the way down into Abilene, into the Del Rio areas. So if you live over there, you guys really need to watch out for these systems. I personally think this could be moved off a bit more into Arkansas, maybe a bit further east. But that's just my personal opinion. So that's, as I said, it's very unpredictable as of right now. The domino effect still has to be monitored and watched out for. But the chances for severe storms here is starting to look a bit more likely. So let's take a look with the NAM 12 kilometer lower resolution model. But this is all we have that actually gets out this far with our mid-range models. So you're going to have to bear with me with the low resolution. But as Wednesday approaches, you can see more thunderstorms to begin to develop, and they start to form here in central parts of Texas. As that continues to move on through, you can see how these thunderstorms really start to form across the board. One massive line here. It isn't going to be as strong as what we once thought because the low pressure system is a lot weaker. Which we'll get into that in a second, but we still have a lot of strong storms that can move on through here. And here's some very long line of storms that is extending practically from St. Louis all the way down towards San Angelo. So we're really going to have to watch out for this. And another thing to note too is the Storm Prediction Center also said that they could increase the probabilities of the risk on Wednesday. So, you know, we're really going to have to watch out as this continues to move on through. But massive line of storms that move on through, and this is the reason why I said Arkansas could be in the risk, because by the overnight hours into the morning, the threat for severe weather could be possible here into central parts of Arkansas. But Thursday definitely could be your risk as well for severe weather. So something to monitor for the most part. Moisture here, we're going to take a look at dew points. And it's relatively moist within the areas that could be impacted. Here's 1 o'clock on Wednesday. You can see how these yellows extend all the way within a line, which is the reason why the severe weather threat is extended as far as it has. So anywhere within this area really could see some severe weather, mainly because if you look at how high the dew points are, they're at the 60s into almost the 70s in some spots, and that is relatively moist for some of these areas. Cape, there's decent amounts of Cape for the most part. The highest amounts of Cape is more or less here towards the Wichita Falls area, so there could be some stronger amounts of supercells here. More amounts of supercells that could be tornadic, so we're really going to have to watch out for that as time progresses. But then as things move on into Thursday, things really called into question as to whether or not there would be something severe there. Alrighty, wind shear. We're going to talk about that here real quickly. 850 millibar low-level jet. And you can see it's relatively strong for the most part in the beginning of the day. You can see how most of the winds come out from the due south. So as you see that, that's really good here for the most part. And if we go over to our 500 millibar wind shear, you can see how there is that veering to where there is some movement with height, the change in wind direction with height. So there is some tornadic indications here just by looking at the 850 millibar wind shear, the low-level wind shear, and then the 500 millibar wind shear, which is our mid to upper level wind shear here. So there is the chance for something to be tornadic with this. Now let's go over to the NAM and see what the actual parameters are for this event on Wednesday. And you can see there is the chance for some severe weather according to the significant tornado parameter. It's pretty much widespread, but it's weak widespread. So we'll have to continue to monitor that. But there is veering with the atmosphere. You can see how the hodograph, if I can zoom in here real quickly, you can see how the hodograph does change with height. It does curl off to the right. So there is that chance for some tornadic activity within these supercells. But the veering is only from 0 to 1, and we have a little bit of veer back veer here. But the good news is that ventilation is away from the thunderstorm, so that if there was anybody who were to chase it, they wouldn't be caught up in rain wrapping. It just would be very complex to chase it because of how, as I said, you'd have supercells that would form something like this, and they'll be moving off in like this general direction. So, you know, unless if you want to get slammed inside the inflow notch by the tornado, I'd highly recommend like staying on the southern or the southeastern parts of the storm. So, something to monitor with all of that. But there is the chance for something to be tornadic here. Actually, this over here in eastern or southeastern parts of Oklahoma, according to the NAM, says that there could be some more of that, more where that came from. A lot better veering here, a lot stronger veering, but then winds kind of just stay in that same spot here from 1 to 5 kilometers, even into 6 kilometers. So the this is really interesting because right here, this is the storm motion as to where it would be within an hour. So if these numbers here from like 3 to 6 kilometers are closer to that, then it could indicate that it's more or less high precipitation based. Same with the 6 kilometers and above. So there is the chance for it to possibly be rain wrapped towards the latter stages and even into eastern parts of Oklahoma. But we're going to have to continue to monitor that to the best of our abilities. And there even is the chance here for, as I said, some tornadic conditions in Arkansas, but it doesn't seem as strong. And there's not a whole lot of wind shear that's correctly moving in the correct direction above 2 kilometers as well. So that's kind of concerning in regards to sustainability for thunderstorms, or, well, tornadic storms. But there still is the risk here in Arkansas. And so that's the reason why I say that the chance for some tornadic storms is possible within this general vicinity. I would talk about Thursday, but as I said, the domino effect kind of just, you know, is really inconsistent. So, you know, there's only so much I can talk about. I've given my hot takes for the most part as to where I think the areas could be impacted the most. So I'll go over it again one more time. I'll take the cities away because they could be kind of distracting a little bit. But right within here, that's not helpful. right within here for Tuesday and Wednesday, I am watching heavily for the highest chance of tornadic activity. Also, there's a chance on Wednesday. If I were to go over here, right within here, the highest chance for tornadic activity could be possible based off of model guidance, but who knows? It might even be somewhere like in here as well. So, I'm trying to do the best I can to try and figure out what's happening, but this event based off of the models just has everyone really perplexed. Not everyone's on exactly the same page, and as much as you'd like to tell us to get onto the same page, we all have our own different opinions, and we all can't really, figure this one out as a giant consensus because it's all different opinions. There's most of the time here with this event, we've been trying to figure out what type of event we're even getting. So it's that type of situation that we're in. And there's only so much we can do. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for the video tomorrow because I will be uploading that. As I said, I also will be live streaming tomorrow. So if you guys want to stay tuned for that, that would be greatly appreciated. That's going to be it from me, guys. My name is Nate. I also go by HockeyBoy Nate. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe, like the video. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace out, everyone.